I'm John Bailey, been a member of Westminster since the fall of 1968. Got engaged as a member because I was asked to work on the every member canvas. And I said, I'm not a member. And I think Hartley was ministered then, I think in 68. No, Pat was still the minister, and that's what really drew me to Westminster was Pat's preaching. And so that's where we started, and I've been engaged here for all these many years in many different ways.
I'm Carson Salyer. I joined the Westminster staff in 1995 as Associate for Pastoral Care, and I was blessed to be here 21 years and retired in 2016. Been a wonderful experience.
So, Carson, let's talk about Habitat and when it started, because I have some minor recollections, but I can't even remember. You were the beginning point for introducing Westminster to the idea of doing a Habitat house. At least in my mind you were. And when was that, and how did you come to the Habitat concept?
I was fortunate in that the church that I served in East Tennessee before coming here was a Habitat church, and we had worked on a couple of projects there, and I knew of its power to motivate and stimulate the life of a congregation and provide decent housing for family in need. In the fall of '95, Rich Penuel asked me to present to the Covenant class and to come introduce myself, which I did, and talked about my education and my former ministry, my family. And at the end of that time, Rich said, what would you like to bring new to Westminster? And I said, well, let me tell you about Habitat for Humanity and what it can do in a congregation. So that's where, I think that's where it started. And I remember two occasions, one at Gene Engel's house and one at your house, where the Wednesday morning Bible study group said, we need to raise some money and start this Habitat project. And I think in '96, we actually pulled our first committee together and sought permission from the session to do a house, to sponsor a house. And the session made it conditional on our ability to raise the money. We had to have the money in hand before we could actually do the house.
But my fairly distinct recollection was that the Habitat organization said the church had to provide $25,000 of seed money commitment to each house before they started one.
Right.
Is that correct?
But our session would not let us approve, move ahead with the project until we had the money.
Right.
So the first committee we pulled together was one that you and Nancy Dunkerley co-chaired.
If you say so.
And working with you, we had Linda Kuhn and Sarah Mitchell rounding up volunteers for the project, strong leaders. Dacey Cowan and Adelaide Hohannes took on the food responsibilities. Judy Cunningham, devotional. Miles Warfield took care of in-kind donations. And Gene Engel took on fundraising. And John Van Maul did publicity.
My recollection was there was a step before that, and I do think I recall, Carson, that at our Wednesday morning so-called Bible study, we could talk more about that, but for several weeks, maybe months, we had talked about the concept of a Habitat house, and everybody in that group of 8 or 10 or 12 of us, all of us relatively young working people, were saying, you know, this is a great idea. And I kept pushing on you. When are we going to pull the trigger? What's got to happen? And you said, Well, we've got to get the money in the budget so that we can move ahead. And in our living room over on Timber Lane, we met in houses. We surfaced the idea, well, we'll raise the money in this group. We'll raise that $25,000. Now, that's my recollection. You correct me, but that's what I recollect.
I think you're absolutely right, and I think as word got out, other people joined us in making gifts.
And I was trying. What was the date? That's what I can't
We
remember.
built in
First house. When was it built?
It was built in over September and October. I think we started the week after Labor Day of '97.
97. That sounds about right.
Habitat is showing that we've now done 29 houses since 1997, which is just absolutely wonderful. The first houses cost around $25,000. They're about $60,000 now. And over the course of the years, we've raised for Habitat right at $1.8 million as a congregation, which is a wonderful thing. But that dollar figure does not represent the depth of the vitality and the witness that the Habitat program brought to this congregation.
Yeah, those were really great times. And you mentioned a committee, which, as I say, I can't even remember. I do remember early on going to the Habitat site and people bringing food in for breakfast and then some kind of lunch at the end of the morning of work and what have you. And it was just really fun, exciting to do, but a great time for fellowship as much as anything.
Absolutely.
We had a few people, maybe you, who knew what they were doing. The rest of us were pretty much there to do what we were told to do. Some of us more compliant with that than others, but without you and Lane Hart and Joe Gaines and some people like that, it wouldn't have happened physically. But it was great.
We were blessed with strong leaders in almost every area that the program needed, including construction. I love the Habitat program because it included every age group in the church could make a contribution and feel a part of the project. I remember vacation Bible school sessions and elementary school Sunday school classes, pulling together housewarming baskets of cleaning materials for the home and maybe even some food gifts. I remember some years Sunday school classes would go out and spread gravel for the driveway. They couldn't be on site when the real construction was going on, but they could go out on Saturday and spread gravel. I remember people in the nursing home who really couldn't make a solid contribution would make financial contributions and offer their prayers for the success of the project and for the family we were engaging and getting to know. Always thought of Habitat as a win-win. People in the church got a chance to live out their faith in a new and dynamic way, perhaps learn new skills, make new friends, be in relationship with people. The Habitat families got a hand up in their life. They got a chance to enter into home ownership and perhaps in a way that they couldn't do with conventional financing, but they could with Habitat because there was no interest charged on the loans. The city of Metro, Nashville, had pieces of vacant real estate come onto the tax rolls as a way to help support the work of our own city. And when Habitat was able to build neighborhoods instead of just doing an infill house here and there, they let the city parks and recreation areas behind in the wake of that subdivision. It was just a phenomenal program. I especially remember our first homeowner, Tanya Campbell.
I remember that name, but I didn't, yeah.
Tanya was a single mom, 2 boys, and she was a clerk in the early morning admission unit down at St. Thomas Hospital. And I would see her sometimes early in the morning and got to know her, particularly through our Habitat project with her.
Where was that first house? Where was it?
It was in Chesapeake subdivision, which is off of Brick Church Pike,
Yeah.
north of Briley Parkway.
Yeah.
And it was a subdivision that the developer had gone broke, and there were some vacant lots that Habitat had bought, and we were putting simple, affordable, decent houses on those lots. And Tanya was our first recipient. After she got the house, I should not say it that way, after she earned the house through the Habitat procedure of, as you say, putting in hours of sweat equity into building other people's homes before she actually worked on her own home. She also had to attend classes and learn about budgeting, and she had to learn about banking, and had to learn about how mortgages work. And though there's no interest on a Habitat mortgage, the loan is serviced like a mortgage by a bank, and there's escrow accounts for taxes and insurance, and homeowners have to learn how that works and what it is to be a responsible citizen to make sure taxes are paid. They have to learn how to be a good neighbor and cut their grass and take care of their property. They really have to come to Habitat with a good credit rating and good leadership potential before they're considered as a candidate for a house. Once Tanya was in her home, her boys suddenly had a yard to play in instead of unsafe apartment or housing grounds to play on or play in. She was able to enjoy a little bit more discretionary money in her budget because she was not paying such a high rent. The mortgage payment was less than rent in public housing at that point. And she was able to advance in her job, and I lost track of her at St. Thomas. She was just not there. I lost track of her. And several months later, she surfaced at Vanderbilt, and she was now supervising a floor at Vanderbilt. She had really advanced in her career. 20 years after that first build, Lanehart checked in with Tanya to see how she was doing, and both her boys had graduated from college. So what this first project did was to really change the whole trajectory of this family's life. And it enabled them to really move up in their economic and their social and their educational spheres. And that's because of Habitat impinging their lives.
It's easy to see the passion that Carson had for these projects for 25 plus years, and we mentioned Steve Lanehart a couple of times, and I think most of us would say that Steve didn't need any of our help. He could have done the construction piece on his own better, but he's been a loyal supporter of the builds over all these years, and Steve deserves a whole lot of credit for the success and sustainability of that mission. At Westminster.
Steve is still an active volunteer SOS with Habitat and works many weekends a year.
I'm Bob Sewell. I've been a member of Westminster since 2003 and been working Habitat several times. Harriet and I have been married for 9 years this November. And we actually met at a Habitat build. I'll let you tell.
I'm Harriet Sewell. I've been working Habitat probably 10 years in a row, and many times gotten up early and driven by myself to who knows where. And happily, a friend called and said, "Can we give you a ride to Habitat?" And so I said, "That'd be great." It was Mary Prue, Allie, and Roy.
And we had lunch together at the Habitat build. We both had hard hats on, and I was talking to her, and I said, "You know, this is a girl that I might want to take out sometime." And so I asked if we could go out for coffee or something like that. sometime.
Well, it didn't exactly happen like that, but pretty close. Roy Alley called Bob over to sit with us at lunch on the curb. I was already sitting with them, and they'd gone to high school together. And so they started talking. We didn't really talk that much. You didn't ask me out for coffee for about a month. But anyway, doesn't
true.
matter.
That
It all
is-
started with Mary Prue and Roy and the curb
That's right.
and the hard hats and the habitat.
And we were just having lunch together.
And that's the beginning.